How to make an avoidant never disrespect you. He will never respect you, not because he does not feel anything, because you taught him he does not have to. Somewhere along the way, without ever saying it out loud, you showed an avoidant person that your boundaries bend, that your silence eventually breaks, that if he waits long enough, you will come back softer than before. And the moment he learned that, respect quietly left the relationship and never came back on its own. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why avoidants disrespect the very people who love them the most. And you will know the precise psychological shift that makes that disrespect impossible to repeat. Not through begging or not through ultimatums, through something far quieter and far more powerful. But first, answer this honestly. Has he ever gone cold right after a good moment between you two? Like closeness itself was a threat. Type yes if that sounds familiar, because what you are about to hear will explain exactly why that happens and how to end it for good. Before we go further, I want you to do one thing. Comment the word calm below if you are dealing with an avoidant person right now. Not because I need the comment, because the simple act of naming what you are going through out loud in front of others is the first step your nervous system takes toward taking your power back. Type calm. Then keep listening, because what comes next changes everything. Let's start with a truth that almost nobody explains properly. Disrespect from an avoidant person is rarely about anger. It is almost never about cruelty. It is a defense mechanism built years before you ever met him, designed to protect a nervous system that once learned closeness was dangerous. Somewhere in his early life, emotional needs were met inconsistently, or dismissed, or mocked, or simply ignored. A child who reaches for comfort and gets nothing learns something devastating. He learns that needing another person is a liability. He learns that vulnerability gets punished, not rewarded. And so, to survive, he builds a wall. Not a dramatic wall, a quiet one, a wall made of distance, of jokes instead of feelings, of leaving the room right when things get real. That wall worked when he was 7. It kept him safe from disappointment. But he is not 7 anymore. He is 30 or 40 or 50, and the wall is still standing, and now it is aimed at you. Here is the part most people never understand. The avoidant person is not choosing to disrespect you the way you would choose to disrespect someone. It is not calculated cruelty. It is an automatic response triggered the instant closeness starts to feel like risk. The nervous system does not ask permission. It simply reacts. Pull away, go quiet, deflect, minimize what you are feeling. Make you feel like you are asking for too much, simply for asking to be seen. But understanding why he does it does not mean you are required to accept it. This is where so many well-meaning, emotionally intelligent people get stuck. They confuse understanding with tolerance. They think, if I just understand him deeply enough, if I am patient enough, if I love him gently enough, the wall will come down on its own. And sometimes it does not come down. It gets reinforced because the softer you become in response to distance, the safer distance feels to him. This is the mechanism you need to see clearly. Every time he pulls back and you chase, you are teaching his nervous system a lesson. The lesson is this: distance gets rewarded with more of your attention. Coldness gets rewarded with your warmth. Disrespect gets rewarded with your patience. You are not weak for doing this. You are human. Closeness is what secure people crave. So when someone pulls away, your natural instinct is to close the gap. But with an avoidant nervous system, closing the gap for him removes the one thing that keeps him regulated, which is space. So the gap he needed just got filled with your anxiety, and now he pulls back even further to get it again. This cycle has a name in psychological literature. It is called the pursuer-distancer dynamic, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. One person pursues, the other distances. The pursuit increases the distancing. The distancing increases the pursuit. Nobody wins. Both people end up exhausted, and the person doing the pursuing quietly starts to lose their own sense of self-worth, because at some point, chasing someone who keeps disappearing starts to feel like begging for basic decency. If any of this describes your relationship, I need you to hear something clearly. What is happening to you is not a reflection of your worth. It is a pattern. Patterns can be interrupted. And interrupting this particular pattern requires something that sounds simple but is genuinely difficult to practice, which is emotional self-regulation in the presence of someone else's dysregulation. Let me explain what that actually means, because it is the single most important skill in this entire video. Emotional self-regulation means your sense of calm, your sense of okayness does not depend on whether he texts back. It does not depend on whether he apologizes. It does not depend on whether he finally sees how much this hurts you. Your calm belongs to you, and you carry it into the room whether he is warm or cold, present or distant, kind or dismissive. This is not the same as suppressing your feelings. Suppression is pretending you are fine when you are not. Regulation is actually being fine, or at least stable, because your stability is not rented from someone else's mood. This is the exact quality avoidant people unconsciously test for over and over without even realizing they are testing. Every cold shoulder, every canceled plan, every emotionally flat response, it is an unspoken question. Will you fall apart? Or will you chase me? Will you shrink? Will you prove that closeness really is dangerous the way I learned it was? When you fall apart, when you chase, when you shrink without meaning to, you confirm his oldest fear. And on some level, that confirmation feels like relief to him because it matches what he already expected. It is a strange, sad kind of comfort, being proven right about something painful. But when you stay regulated, when you respond with calm instead of panic, when a cold message gets a warm but unbothered reply instead of 3 paragraphs asking what is wrong, something shifts in the dynamic that words alone cannot create. You become unpredictable in the best possible sense. You stop confirming the old story. And a nervous system that has spent its whole life confirming the same painful story about closeness suddenly meets someone who does not play along. That is disorienting. That is also, whether he can name it or not, deeply respectable. Respect at its core is rarely given to the person who tries hardest to be loved. It is given to the person who does not need to be loved in order to be okay. This is not about playing games or being cold on purpose. It is about genuinely, internally building a version of yourself that does not collapse when someone else withdraws. So how do you actually build that? Let's get specific, because vague advice like just be secure is useless without a method. The first shift is learning to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it through someone else's reassurance. When he goes quiet, your body will scream at you to do something, or text again, call, ask what is wrong. That urge is not weakness, it is biology, but acting on it every single time is what trains him to see your discomfort as something he can control simply by disappearing. Instead, practice this. When the urge to chase hits, pause. Physically pause. Put the phone down, breathe slowly, 4 counts in, 6 counts out. Let the discomfort exist without immediately discharging it into a message. This single pause, repeated enough times, rewires your own nervous system to tolerate uncertainty without panicking. And a person who can tolerate uncertainty without panicking is a person who is very, very hard to manipulate through distance. The second shift is speaking in boundaries, not in pleas. There is a massive difference between saying, please do not go quiet on me, it hurts so much, and saying, when you go quiet without explanation, I'm going to use that time to focus on myself, and we can talk when you're ready to communicate like a partner. The first sentence is a plea. It hands your emotional state directly into his control. The second sentence is a boundary. It tells him exactly what will happen, calmly, without threat, without drama, and then it requires you to actually follow through. This is critical. A boundary you do not enforce is not a boundary. It is a suggestion, and avoidant people, whether consciously or not, will test suggestions until they find out they are optional. The moment you say there will be a consequence and then there is not one, you have taught him that your words carry no real weight. But the moment you say there will be a consequence and there actually is one, delivered without anger, without punishment, just calm follow-through, something in him recalibrates. He learns that you are not a wall he can lean on indefinitely without maintenance. He learns you are a person with limits. and people with limits are, without exception, treated with more respect than people without them. The third shift, and this one surprises people, is reducing your emotional availability to match his effort, not his need. This is not about punishing him. It is about accuracy. Many people in relationships with avoidant partners give 100% of their emotional energy regardless of what is coming back. They over-explain, they over-apologize, they initiate every conversation, plan every date, remember every important day while receiving a fraction of that energy in return. This creates a devastating imbalance where the avoidant person barely has to invest anything because you are investing enough for both of you. When you scale your emotional output to match what is actually being offered, two things happen. First, you protect your own energy, which you deserve. Second, and this is the part that changes the dynamic, the avoidant person suddenly feels the absence of your effort in a way they never felt before, because they had never actually noticed it while it was constant. Consistency, paradoxically, becomes invisible. It is only when it fluctuates that it becomes felt. The fourth shift is refusing to explain your worth. Many people, when disrespected by someone they love, instinctively start building a case. They list every reason they deserve better. They point out every time they showed up. They ask, "Do you know how much I do for you? Do you see how much I love you?" This comes from a good place, but it is unintentionally a form of begging for validation from the exact person who is currently withholding it. A person who genuinely knows their own worth does not need the person disrespecting them to confirm it. They simply act from that worth. They leave the room when it is disrespected. They lower their tone instead of raising it. They let their actions communicate the boundary instead of narrating it. Now let's talk about something almost nobody addresses directly, which is why disrespect specifically increases when things are going well. You may have noticed this, or things feel close, warm, connected, and then suddenly, without any clear trigger, he becomes distant, sarcastic, dismissive, almost cruel. This is not random. This is what is sometimes called a deactivation strategy. Closeness activates the exact fear that his nervous system has spent a lifetime protecting against. So unconsciously, he creates distance to regulate that fear, and the fastest way to create distance is often through minor cruelty, minor disrespect, small acts that push you back to a safer emotional radius. Understanding this does not mean tolerating it. It means you stop personalizing it as evidence that you did something wrong and start recognizing it as a pattern that has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with his internal wiring. This recognition alone removes an enormous amount of the emotional charge from these moments. You stop spiraling into, "What did I do wrong?" and start responding with, "This is the pattern, and I know exactly how to respond to it." So how do you respond to it in the moment without losing yourself? Picture this: you had a beautiful evening together. The next morning he is distant, short replies, a slightly cold tone. The old you would spiral, or did I say something wrong? Did I come on too strong? Should I text him and ask if everything is okay? The regulated you does something different. You notice the shift. You name it internally without panic. That's the pattern. He is not rejecting me. He is regulating a fear that has nothing to do with anything I did. And then you continue your day. You do not chase an explanation. You do not send a paragraph decoding his mood. You simply live your life with the same warmth you would have shown regardless, but without the anxious overinvestment that used to follow these moments. This is not coldness on your part. This is what real emotional intelligence looks like in practice. It is the ability to hold two things at once: compassion for why someone struggles and firm respect for your own needs without collapsing either one into the other. Here is something important to understand about respect itself. Respect is not requested. It is not earned through explanation. It is not won through proving your value over and over. Respect is a response to demonstrated self-respect. People, avoidant or not, secure or not, calibrate how to treat you based on how you treat yourself in front of them. If you tolerate being ignored, you teach that ignoring you is tolerable. If you tolerate being dismissed, you teach that dismissing you is tolerable. If you tolerate disrespect and then immediately soften, apologize, or overcompensate, you teach that disrespect has no real cost. This is not about becoming harsh or transactional. It is about alignment. Your actions need to match your stated boundaries, consistently, calmly, without drama, over and over, until his nervous system updates its model of who you are. Nervous systems do not update from a single conversation. They update from repeated experience. You can tell him 100 times that you deserve to be treated with respect, and none of those 100 conversations will change his behavior as much as 10 consistent moments where disrespect actually had a real, calm, immediate consequence. Let's talk about what those consequences should actually look like, because this is where people often swing too far in one direction or the other. Some people, once they learn about boundaries, become punitive. They weaponize distance. They give the silent treatment as revenge. This does not create respect. It creates a war of withdrawal. And avoidant people, ironically, are extremely comfortable in a war of withdrawal because withdrawal is their home turf. If you try to out-avoid an avoidant person, you will lose because they have had a lifetime of practice. Let's slow down for a moment and talk about the specific language patterns avoidant people often use to minimize your feelings, because recognizing them in real time is half the battle. You say, "It hurt when you did not answer for 2 days." Or he says, "You are overreacting. It was not even that long." You say, "I felt dismissed when you laughed off something serious I said." He says, "I was just joking. You take everything so seriously." Notice the shape of this. It is not an apology. It is not even a denial of the event. It is a redirection, moving the conversation away from his behavior and onto your reaction to his behavior. This is one of the most common ways disrespect hides inside ordinary conversation. And it works precisely because it makes you start defending your own feelings instead of addressing what actually happened. The moment you start explaining why you are not overreacting, you have already lost the thread of the original issue. A more regulated response sounds like this: "I'm not asking you to agree with how I felt. I am telling you how I felt, and I need you to hear it without correcting it. Then stop talking. Let the silence sit." Most people rush to fill silence with more justification, more evidence, more emotional labor. Resist that urge. The silence itself is doing important work. It communicates that your feelings do not require his approval to be valid. Another pattern worth naming is what happens after a moment of real vulnerability. You share something honest, something that took courage to say, and instead of meeting it with warmth, he changes the subject, makes a joke, or goes quiet in a way that feels like punishment. This is often not intentional cruelty. It is discomfort with intimacy expressing itself as avoidance of the topic entirely. But here is the important distinction. Understanding the source of the behavior does not obligate you to pretend it did not sting. You are allowed to say plainly, "That felt like you brushed past something important to me, and I would like us to come back to it when you are ready." This holds both truths at once: compassion for his discomfort and honesty about your own experience. That combination, held simultaneously without collapsing into either resentment or over-accommodation, is the actual definition of emotional maturity in this context. There is also a subtler form of disrespect that deserves its own attention, and that is the erosion of your reality through small comments over time. A dismissive comment about something you care about, a slightly mocking tone when you express excitement, a pattern of forgetting things that matter to you while remembering details that matter to him. None of these, taken individually, seem significant enough to address. That is exactly what makes them so corrosive. They accumulate quietly, and over months you find yourself smaller, more cautious, more likely to downplay your own needs before he even has the chance to dismiss them. This is sometimes called anticipatory shrinking, and it is one of the clearest signs that a pattern of disrespect has taken root without a single dramatic incident ever occurring. If you recognize this in yourself, the antidote is not a big confrontation. It is a return to expressing your actual preferences, your actual excitement, your actual needs in small moments repeatedly, regardless of how they are received. Say what you actually think a movie was like, even if he seems unimpressed. Express genuine enthusiasm about something you care about, even if his response feels lukewarm. This is not for his benefit. It is for yours. Every time you shrink a genuine reaction to avoid a dismissive response, you reinforce your own belief that your inner world is inconvenient to others. Every time you express it anyway, calmly, without needing his validation to feel it fully, you rebuild the muscle of taking up appropriate space in your own life. The consequence that actually works is not punishment. It is simply removing your presence from disrespect calmly, without announcement, without drama, and returning your presence only when the disrespect stops. If he raises his voice, you leave the room, not as a power move, but because you do not remain in rooms where you are being spoken to that way. If he cancels plans without real explanation for the third time, you stop making plans that depend on him, not out of spite, but because you are simply adjusting your expectations to match demonstrated behavior. If he goes cold after intimacy, you do not chase the warmth back. You continue your life exactly as you would if he had not gone cold, because your emotional stability was never supposed to depend on his mood in the first place. Notice what all of these have in common. None of them require him to change. None of them require an argument. None of them require you to convince him of anything. They simply require you to consistently act like someone who values herself. Because the moment you consistently act like that, you stop being a person he can disrespect without cost, and you become a person he has to actually earn. This is the part that surprises people the most. Avoidant people, despite their fear of closeness, are often deeply drawn to emotional stability in others, precisely because it is so rare in their own internal experience. A partner who does not need constant reassurance, who does not spiral when things go quiet, who has a full and rich life independent of the relationship. This kind of partner is, paradoxically, less threatening to an avoidant nervous system than someone who is emotionally fused to their every mood. Stability does not trigger the fear of engulfment the way anxious pursuit does. Stability feels strangely like safety. This does not mean becoming distant or playing hard to get as a strategy. Strategy implies performance, and performance is exhausting and eventually transparent. What we are talking about is becoming genuinely secure so that your calm is not an act. It is simply who you are now. This takes time. It takes practice. It takes the specific, repeated choice to regulate yourself instead of outsourcing your regulation to someone else's behavior. Let's talk practically about how to begin this shift starting today in small, doable steps. Start by identifying your specific trigger moments. For most people in relationships with avoidant partners, there are 2 or 3 recurring situations that consistently spark anxiety and chasing behavior. It might be unanswered texts, or it might be a shift in tone after closeness. It might be canceled plans. Write these down. Naming your specific triggers clearly and honestly takes away some of their unconscious power over you, because you can no longer be blindsided by something you have already identified. Next, prepare your regulated response in advance before the trigger happens. This matters more than people realize. In the heat of the moment, your nervous system is flooded, and flooded nervous systems make poor decisions. But if you have already decided calmly in advance what you will do when he goes quiet, you do not have to think clearly in the moment. You just have to follow the plan you already made while calm. Or something like, when he goes quiet, I will not text again for at least 24 hours, and I will spend that time doing something that fills me up instead of something that fills the silence with anxiety. Then practice the pause every single time the urge to chase appears. This is the muscle that gets stronger with repetition. The first few times will feel unbearable. Your body will insist that something terrible is happening and only immediate action will fix it. This is your nervous system's old programming firing, not an accurate signal about present danger. Breathe through it. Let the urge rise and fall without acting on it. Each time you do this successfully, the urge gets slightly weaker the next time. After that, start speaking your boundaries out loud, calmly, once, without repeating yourself. Avoidant people often respond to repetition and pleading by tuning out entirely, the same way anyone tunes out a sound that becomes background noise. But a boundary stated once, clearly, calmly, and then actually enforced through your actions lands with far more weight than the same boundary repeated anxiously 10 times. Say it once, then let your behavior do the rest of the talking. Finally, build a life that does not orbit around his responsiveness. This is perhaps the single most protective thing you can do, both for your own well-being and for the health of the relationship itself. Invest in friendships. Invest in work you care about. Invest in physical movement, in hobbies, in your own personal growth. Not as a strategy to make him jealous or curious, but because a full life is simply the natural output of a person who has stopped waiting for someone else's mood to determine her own. Here is something worth sitting with. The healthiest version of this dynamic is not one where you finally crack the code and make him behave perfectly. It is one where you become so genuinely stable, so genuinely whole on your own, that his behavior simply stops having the power to unravel you. In that version, either he rises to meet the standard you have quietly, consistently set, because avoidant does not mean incapable. It means undertrained in emotional closeness, and people can absolutely be retrained by consistent, calm, respectful modeling. Or he does not rise to meet it, and you are left standing intact in a life you have already built to be full without him, able to make a genuinely free choice about whether to stay, instead of a desperate choice born from fear of being alone. That difference between choosing from fullness and choosing from fear is everything. Relationships built on the second one are fragile no matter how much love is present, because fear-based choices require constant management, constant reassurance, constant proof. Relationships that survive from the first one, chosen from fullness, tend to be the ones where respect was never in question, because both people showed up as whole individuals rather than two halves desperately trying to complete each other. One more thing before we close, because I think it matters more than almost anything else in this video. None of this is about becoming cold or emotionally unavailable yourself, or turning into someone who plays games to win some invisible power struggle. The goal was never to out-avoid the avoidant or to punish him into compliance. The goal is to become the kind of person whose warmth is real, but whose peace does not depend on another person's capacity to receive it. That is not coldness. That is, in the truest sense, emotional maturity, and it is available to you regardless of what he ever decides to do with his own. If you recognized yourself anywhere in this, in the chasing and the over-explaining and the quiet shrinking after every cold shoulder, know that none of that makes you weak. It makes you someone who loves deeply in a world that does not always know how to receive that kind of love well. The work now is not to love less. It is to love from a place that cannot be shaken, so that the next time disrespect shows up at your door, it simply does not find anywhere to sit down. Comment the word calm if you are still here, if this describes something you are living through right now, and if you are ready to build the version of yourself that no longer bends just to keep someone close. Someone else scrolling through these comments right now needs to see that word from you, more than you know.